Hello everyone, welcome back to Believer Science Academy, Bengaluru. This is topic of the day discussion session. In this session, we will be discussing a very important topic, that is Beggar-Thy-Neighbor policy. What is Beggar-Thy-Neighbor policy? What are its implications? And which all the countries are following this method, and all we will be discussing in this video. Very important, especially if you are attending interview in the coming days. Because of the Trump policies, this term is in news. Okay, so why it is in news? It is in news because in 2025, under Make America Great Again campaign, Trump and the United States imposed a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, long-term neighbors of USA, and a 10% tariff on Chinese goods, exemplifying modern beggar-thy-neighbor policies. Okay, so this is why it is in news. So what is basically beggar-thy-neighbor policy? Beggar-thy-neighbor policies refer to protectionist economic strategies adopted by a country to improve its own economic situation at the expense of other nations. Okay, key word here is protectionist economies adopted by the country to improve its own economic situations at the expense of other nation. Okay, so there is country A, aim of that country is to protect its own economy. How it is doing so? It is doing so at the expense of another country, that is B. How they are doing is, there are certain protectionist practices such as increasing the tariff or ban on the imports from this particular country, etc., is going to impact the flow of imports or exports from this country to country A, and the result, it is going to impact the economy of country B. Okay, that is beggar-thy-neighbor policy. What they are doing is, they are making the other country, be it the neighbor or any other country, they are making it a beggar. Okay, so these policies often include tariffs, quotas, and currency devaluation. Okay, we will see how they are used here. Example, the US-China trade war, where the US imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, promoting retaliatory measures from China. Okay, so it is like, obviously one country is not going to sit down. If country A has put certain tariff on country B, and if it is exporting some things to country B, obviously country B is also saying, if you put tariff on me, I am going to put tariff on you. So if there is a retaliatory practice from two countries, one country under beggar-thy-neighbor policy has imposed tariffs, has reserved quotas, has resulted in currency devaluation, other country is obviously not going to sit down. It is also going to retaliate. When a country retaliates, a beggar-thy-neighbor policy turns into a term called as trade wars. Okay, trade wars. We are at that junction of the history where wars through conventional weapons are not feasible to both the countries. So in order to affect another country, what the current generation, what the current countries of this present time are doing is going for proxy wars such as terrorism, funding the separatist activities, funding the NGOs to reduce the developmental activities, cyber terrorism, etc. And another milder proxy war is called as trade wars. Okay, hope you understood the trade wars. If you want more context to this, I will give you an example from the history, a very interesting Example from the history. Okay, so post 1940s, or suppose say post World War II. Post World War II, there are three major powers. One is Russia or Soviet Union, another one is USA, and another one was beat, though light or in the sense lesser compared to these two. There was another power, that was Europe as a whole. Okay, Europe as a whole, or you can say European Union. Okay, since Soviet Union was a communist in nature, communist country in nature, it didn't allow imports from either USA or from Europe or any other rest of the countries. It focused on manufacturing by themselves and producing within their countries and developing their own countries. So for trade, the only option left for these two countries was trading with USA and Europe with, like USA with Europe, Europe with USA. Okay, there was an interesting story between later hubs of 1950s. Okay, around 1950s, USA was very famous for its chicken. Yes, you heard it right. It was very famous for its chicken. What the USA was doing is, USA was exporting this chicken to Europe. Okay, USA was exporting this chicken to Europe. USA gave incentive to the farmers of USA so that they can cultivate or they can grow the chickens here, and this chicken, which is very popular in Europe, was sent to Europe. Obviously, what happened? Chicken growths in chicken export from USA started growing, and the other impact which happened to Europe was that the farmers of USA or Europe were suffering. Farmers of USA were suffering because there was more demand for the American chicken and less demand for the European chicken. As a result, the farmers of Europe started protesting. Okay, farmers of Europe started protesting, and they started pressurizing their government that either you put a ban on these imports or we are not going to vote for you. Okay, or we are going to go for like protest, etc., etc. So what the Europe did was, under the pressure, what Europe did was, so you are sending chicken from USA to us. What we are going to do is, we are going to increase the tariff on chicken from USA. Increase the tariff on chicken from USA, and the very next year, in the 1956 or 1957, forgot the year, the growth trajectory hit a record below. Okay, record low. Okay, the exports from USA hit a record low, and the dominant or alternative effect in US, like Europe, was that the production of European or the sale of European chicken was on the low because there was tariff and it became costly. The sale of European chicken increased again. Okay, so it had a negative impact on US chicken and positive impact on like European chicken. Okay, so this, when the Europe raised the tariff, was in a way beggar-thy-neighbor policy here. Beggar-thy-neighbor policy. I mean, USA is not a neighbor. USA was never going to become a beggar because they just put an imposition on chicken. But still, this can be called as a beggar-thy-neighbor policy. From history, one thing we should know is, US is never going to stand still. USA is never going to take these kind of things from themselves. They are always going to look after the interests of USA. So what they did was, Europe during that time was a powerhouse in automobile industry. Powerhouse in automobile industries, especially countries like Italy and Germany. Italy, famous like Lamborghini, Ferrari, Bugatti, etc., etc. Whereas Germany, Volkswagen, Mercedes, Benz, etc., etc. are famous. And USA was importing more luxury cars or more cars from the Europe. So obviously, the sale of European cars to USA was always on the high, and the sale of domestic European cars was low and low because of the readily availability and lesser tariffs on the European cars. Now, USA thought that if you are going to raise imports or import duty or tariffs on our chicken, what we are going to do is we are going to just reciprocate it with you. We are going to have a tit for tat strategy with you. What the USA did is for the cars example, cars like automobiles from the Europe, they increase the tariff. Okay, they increase the tariff. Obviously, the American homegrown or home manufactured cars became more cheap, more accessible, and the European exports or European cars became less accessible. Okay, now that USA retaliated, then this was called as trade wars. Okay, so this was a modern examples of trade wars. Okay, is it that this is the start of trade war? No, there have been trade wars from since the ancient time. You can trace it back to the ancient time when the Rome and India had trades. Rome partially put imposition on the import of Muslim from India. That was an example of trade wars, and this is a modern example of trade wars. Okay, hope the concept is clear with respect to beggar-the-neighbor policy and trade wars. And what the impact was that obviously USA's economy also suffered because of chicken, farmers suffered, and here manufacturers of Europe also suffered. So it is going to have a tit for tat effect. Okay. Now, coming back to this topic. So, what are the positive implications of the beggar-thy-neighbor policy? Okay, the main aim is to improve their own nation. So, nation first policy. Under this, it resulted in boost in domestic economy, as we saw in the example of Europe. It protects local industries, local farmers of Europe, and jobs, discouraging the imports. It is going to improve the jobs. In example of this chicken war, farmers were hugely benefited from the ban on exports of like USA chicken. The other side of the coin is USA's automobile industry benefited heavily from the import duty ban on or import duty on European cars. Okay, then it encourages domestic consumption of locally produced goods. That is what was the case with respect to USA when they put imposition on European cars. Okay, hope you understood this one. Now, it enhances national security. How? It protects key industries from the foreign dominance. It ensures self-reliance in strategic sectors like defense and technology. Okay, for this, a key industry from foreign dominance, we can give an example of recent COVID-19, and we can give example of India and China itself. Okay, India was considered as a pharmaceutical hub of the world because it was producing cheaper pharmas, but the backdrop of this was India was heavily dependent on China for AIP, that is the raw material for pharma ingredients. Okay, since there was COVID-19, since there was pandemic, what China did was China put import or export ban on the AIPs. Export ban on the AIPs. Obviously, it impacted Indian pharma industry. India was not able to produce the pharma it required. As a result, many of the Indians lost their lives. So, since India was dependent on China, as soon as China put a ban on their products, it resulted in loss to the India. So, this beggar-thy-neighbor policy or nation first policy is going to get rid of any dominance of other country in a particular industries. Okay, next. Obviously, it encourages exports. For example, depreciating currency makes exports cheaper and more competitive in the export arena. It enhances global demand for the domestic goods because they are cheaper. This is what China most of the times does this. They are devaluing their own currency. As a result, their goods become cheaper in the foreign markets and their goods are preferred over the domestic goods. Okay, so these are the positive implications for a nation which follows the beggar-thy-neighbor policy. However, there are certain criticism or the negatives of this beggar-thy-neighbor policy as well. One is it will have an impact on global economy. Very recent China-USA trade war of 2018 during the first Trump period, it resulted in the global economic decline. That the US-China trade war of 2018 to present disrupted global supply chains. It reduced the international trade volumes, affecting many other countries who were part of this global supply chains. Next, higher consumer prices. Okay, obviously. Example, the US tariffs on steel and aluminium under the Section 232 raised the production cost for industries who depended on the steel, because they were importing steel from the China, because they were importing steel from India and other countries. They put tariff on the steels. Now the steel locally produced in USA was costly. Okay, was costly compared to the steel they were importing from other countries. As a result, the production also increased. The production cost also increased. As a result, since the production cost of goods was increased, it also had a inflationary impact on the people of USA. Okay, the Federal Reserve estimated that the tariff cost US consumers and business about 1.4 billion per month. Okay, so this was the cost of tariffs. Instead of helping the USA or helping the USA consumers or helping the USA market, it backfired on the USA consumers. Though it might have helped or benefited the US local manufacturers, it had a negative impact on US consumers. Then the historical warnings, there have been examples from the history itself. That is, Smoot-Hallway Tariff Act of 1930 raised US import tariffs, triggering retaliation from the trading partners. Okay, so USA raised the tariff and other countries also followed the tariff, like raising tariff. It resulted in trade wars between US and all the other trading partners. It contributed to the global trade collapse and worsened the Great Depression. So the global exports fell by nearly 2/3 during 1929 to 1934. This phase from 1929 to 1934 is called as the Great Depression of the USA. It was initially like not only USA, it also affected whole of the globe itself. Okay, then reduced innovation and efficiency. Example, India's license Raj from 1947 to 1991 imposed heavy regulations, stifling innovation and economic growth. As a result, the imports from other countries were reduced. In the sense, there was no import from other countries because of license Raj, and whatever was produced, it was produced within India only, and whatever was available for the Indian consumers was only Indian produced. As a result, it stifled innovation. It also resulted in declining economic growth. Okay, only when this license Raj was abolished in 1991 LPG reforms, the outset, in the sense the foreign goods started entering India, it resulted in competition, it resulted in boom of Indian economic growth. Okay, post 1991 economic liberalization led to greater efficiency and competition. Okay, so it is not only the USA that goes for beggar-the-neighbor policy. There have been many countries that have used this policy. First one is US again, trade wars and tariffs. Under America First policy, or Make America Great Again policy, the US imposed tariffs on 200 billion worth of Chinese goods in 2018. It led to Chinese retaliation, causing market disruptions, not only affecting these both countries but affecting the global trade as well. And China's currency policies, Chinese People's Bank of China, it depreciated yuan to make Chinese exports cheaper. Okay, when these Chinese exports were cheaper, it started dumping the manufactured goods of China to other countries. This is called as dumping. It started dumping them in other countries, so it resulted in the loss for those countries where these manufacturing goods were dumped, such as India, Southeast Asian countries, and even USA also. In 2019, the US Treasury labeled China as a currency manipulator. Okay, so currency manipulation is also one of the tools through which beggar-the-neighbor policy is followed. Japan's currency interventions. The Bank of Japan weakened the yen to boost exports, similar to what China did. While benefiting from exports, this increased import cost for domestic consumers. Okay, a country like India or a country like Japan. Though Japan is a manufacturing hub, but it is not a manufacturing hub at the level of China. Okay, if you want to make your exports cheaper by reducing the your currency value against the dollar, if your exports are going to become cheaper and become competitive, what you are importing from other country will become costly, will affect consumers as well. Okay, for China, which has self-sufficiency in manufacturing, etc., etc., they do not depend on imports that much, so currency devaluation helps them. Now India historically and presently a more import oriented country. If you want to increase the exports by reducing the currency value, it is going to increase the imports exports, but the imports become costlier. Obviously it is going to be inflationary in nature. Okay, that is why India and other countries don't go for this devaluation. Only those countries who are manufacturing hubs go for devaluation. Next, Germany's eurozone trade advantage. Germany's export driven economy creates imbalances within the eurozone. Weaker European economies struggle to compete, increasing the economic disparities. Within the eurozone, there is a less tariff on the trade between these eurozone countries. Since Germany is a manufacturing hub, it is taking the advantage of this less tariffs. As a result, it is exporting more, and it is impacting the other countries in eurozone. Okay, then so does India use this policy? In India has engaged in protectionist trade practices, particularly in global economic decline. And so India has also gone for this one. That is, in 2018, India raised import duties on electronics, agricultural goods, etc., etc., aimed at promoting domestic manufacturing and reducing foreign reliance. That is the famous Atmanirbhar Bharat. Atmanirbhar Bharat or becoming self-reliant Bharat. One of the aim is that we are going to put import duties on whatever you are importing. As a result, we are going to increase the manufacturing in the country itself, so that Indian goods become more competitive compared to the foreign goods. Then restrictions on Chinese imports, tariffs and bans on Chinese products after geopolitical tensions in the recent years, banned Chinese apps such as TikTok and increased scrutiny of Chinese investments in India. Okay, these are some of the examples of scrutiny or beggar-the-neighbor policy. So way forward, you should also protect your own interests and also protect global trade as well. So there should be a sort of balance. How do you achieve this balance? By balanced trade policies, that is a mix of strategic protectionism and open trade is needed. Strengthening WTO mechanisms can prevent trade wars. Focus on competitiveness, that is, instead of protectionism, nations should invest in innovation and technology, skill development, and infrastructure growth. Ensuring sustainable economic growth without harming trading partners is the need of the hour. So this ends our topic of the day, a very important and interesting topic. If you like the video, please like the video. Hit the like button and comment on the video. And if you want to check out the channel, please subscribe to the channel and also click on the bell icon so that you don't miss any notification. With this, I will end the session. Jai Hind.